Posted by you/Banco Airtel. What is the most disturbing thing to know? Often, burnt bodies are found in the same stance, known as the boxer pose due to muscles contracting from heat. It's an incredibly disturbing looking thing. I first heard about it from my grandfather that fought in Burma. During the war he was present at a Burmese funeral in which the cadaver was burnt on a pyre. Just as the flames began to singe the corpse, it sat up straight. The Burmese, of course, got a good laugh out of the British soldiers collectively shitting themselves, as contractions due to heat during cremation is apparently rather common. Doesn't make it any less creepy. Sarin gas is one of the worst ways to kill another human being, and we have seen multiple instances where it has been used on innocent people. Whether relaxed or contracting, your muscles need certain signals in order to function. When you flex a muscle, a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine floods the muscle cells, telling them to contract. Your brain eventually tells the muscles to stop contracting, and so that acetylcholine has to be removed. This is done with acetylcholinesterase, an enzyme which breaks it down and allows your muscles to relax. This happens for every movement of every muscle in your body, whether you're flexing your bicep or blinking. Every beat of your heart. Sarin kills because it bonds with acetylcholinesterase, completely changing its structure and rendering the enzyme useless. This means your muscles never relax. They flex harder and harder and harder. Your entire body can cramp, your pupils, everything. The burning gets worse and worse and the pain is unbearable. If enough of it enters the bloodstream, usually via skin, it will lock up your diaphragm and you will asphyxiate. It kills quickly, but I struggle to imagine too many things that would be worse than dying from cramps in muscles you didn't even realize existed. It's not the worst weapon humans have at their disposal, as if you survive a sarin attack you're likely to make a full recovery, as it doesn't scar lung tissue like other chemical weapons. That being said, it's still classified as a weapon of mass destruction and is supposed to be banned. Adding the wiki for sarin for anyone interested. Polar bears are the only bear species that actively hunt and kill humans for food. There's a rhyme that everyone living where bears live needs to know, and why the rhyme is so important. If it's brown, lie down. Brown or grizzly bears will leave you alone if you play dead. Climbing up a tall tree works with adult brown bears, since they can't climb trees. If it's black, fight back. Black bears will back off when they realize you're more of a threat than they realize, but do not climb a tree to escape. Both cubs and adult black bears can climb trees. If it's white, say goodnight. Polar bears are not only the largest bears, but they are ambush predators. If one manages to sneak up on you, you're as good as dead. The best you can do to escape is either run and drop your clothes. Fortunately for you, they have very short attention spans and they'll stop momentarily to sniff at your clothes, because it's not normal for their food to suddenly drop something like that, or start praying to whatever deity you believe or don't believe in. The Nutty Putty cave accident. Google for full disturbing details. A map of the cave, but basically a guy got stuck caving in a very narrow unmapped tunnel, upside down. They could not get him out, but almost did. One of the rescuers made eye contact with him apparently, but then their pulley system broke and he fell further down. Unfortunately he ended up dying of cardiac arrest from being upside down for so long, and they couldn't get him out / never retrieve the body because it was too dangerous for rescuers. Truly so disturbing. I've thought about it probably once a week since I found out about it a few months ago. Edit. Even more disturbing now that someone gave this a wholesome award. I work as an anesthesiologist. I've put people to sleep in an emergency situation knowing that they will almost certainly not survive the surgery. These are generally situations where without surgery the patient will not survive, but even with surgery the chances of survival are still small. In most of these instances the patients are too obtuned or aren't conscious enough to be aware of the gravity of their situation, but in a number of instances the patients have been conscious, talking although clearly anxious. I try to reassure and tell the person that we won't leave their side, that we will take care of them and that they will be fine. It kind of fucks me up a bit to say this to someone, but I always include the last part because I just don't see the point in telling them the truth. I had one guy tell me he felt like he wasn't going to make it. I told him he would make it but knew he wasn't going to. I put him to sleep knowing that the last human face he would see before he died was mine, as he stared up at me as I held an oxygen mask over his mouth and nose. I'd consider myself quite a resilient person, but knowing this stuff is a bit of a load to carry around. One of the scariest and most disturbing thing I've watched in the internet is that one guy's slow descent to insanity because its brain lost its ability to sleep. He vlogged regularly until he died. That's one of the most disturbing things I know, that anyone, including myself, can have their last sleep without knowing it. Early childhood malnutrition. Between ages 0 to 5, causes irreversible loss of IQ, 11 to 20 points, and predisposes people to higher levels of violence. Prefrontal cortex doesn't develop the same. And if you miss that window, there's no intervention that can recover the gap. I live in South Africa, highest Gini coefficient in the world, highest unemployment, third highest violent crime rate, one of the worst education systems in the world, and it fucking keeps me up at night. I wonder, if we changed nothing except introducing a one nutritious meal per day feeding scheme for ECD, what would happen? It hurts. I worked as a palliative carer for about 3 years. I looked after terminally ill people who had chosen to die at home after being discharged from hospital. After a while, you learn some telltale signs that people are deteriorating. After a bit longer, you start to learn how long people generally have left, even down to a few hours. I always went with honesty. I felt it was my job to support the patients' families as well as the patients, so if they asked how long I thought they had left, I would answer honestly, obviously with the disclaimer that I wasn't a doctor and I could only base it on my previous experiences. The wife of one of my patients told me that their children, adults, were visiting the following weekend to say their goodbyes. I had to decide carefully on what to say next, but I ultimately chose to recommend that they visit the following day, at the latest. I regretted saying it because she was devastated. She took my advice and her husband passed away peacefully 48 hours later, after seeing his kids. I'm glad I did it, but upsetting that lady was absolutely gut-wrenching. Some people didn't want to know, and it was their right not to know. That was the worst. In those cases, you had to not say anything. Sometimes they'd say see you tomorrow and I had to reply, yes, have a good night and I'll see you in the morning, knowing full well that they were going to pass in the night. When I worked as at the bedside early in my nursing career, I was assigned dying patients who haven't made the call to go peacefully. I guess it's because I am a big guy, but I am a softie, and have no shame in hugging it out with family and crying with them. I worked nights. I would chat with these patients when I could. I would tell them the thing no one else would. They would tell me how hard they are fighting, 85, 90 and beyond, but they're tired, in agony, and they don't want to disappoint their family by dying. But as a nurse you know that they don't have much left in the tank. Pressures aren't responding to meds, increasing O2 over and over again till you're maxing out on the BiPAP, and they only have a vent in front of them left. I lost my mom as a young adult. I watched her fight. I watched her suffer, for us. I told her the same thing I told every other patient in that. We feel your pain. And if you want to keep fighting, you do that. But none of us will be disappointed if you want to punch your ticket on this life. Just let us say goodbye. These people were full codes, save at all costs people. And I still would. I advocate for my patients, but respect the choices. 95% of my patients would go on to palliative care within a day. Family would find me often, and thank me for guiding their family to a comfortable passing. How they were at peace now. It was an odd gift I was given, but the cost was high. I left part of my heart with every patient who was dying, opening that old wound I drew strength from. We enforce retirement ages in many critical fields like medicine and engineering due to scientifically provable cognitive decline. But we also allow people in their 70s and 80s to regularly govern our countries and our lives. Some of you are stating that there are no legal limits on the age of physicians and engineers. I never said there were laws regarding age limits. In medicine, many hospitals and health organizations have implemented cognitive testing requirements for aging physicians. The physicians are suing for age discrimination, but the change in policies are happening and should be happening. Certified professional engineers are required to go through continuing education and to recertify during their careers, which creates effectively the same check to stop people from practicing when they can no longer practice safely. Making an elderly person repeat, person, woman, man, camera, TV, is not remotely enough of a cognitive test to drive, let alone run the freaking country. I read something like this right around the time my oldest was born. It made me sad, so I have made picking up my kids part of their birthday ritual. I plan to continue every year until one of us dies. Prions. They are proteins that make normal proteins in your brain fold abnormally, causing neurological decay and various prion diseases. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is one example. CJD may occur spontaneously, be inherited, or be transmitted by contact with infected tissue, such as during a transplant or from eating contaminated meat. Once this starts, it's 100% fatal. Most often within 1 year, you're dead. No cure. You can kill the prion, with several hours of heat at 900 F. This obviously kills the person too. Thankfully it's rare. Less than 1,000 cases per year in the US. Still scares the shit out of me. Years ago I remember watching an episode of the show Monsters Inside Me where this 16-year-old kid was doing something outside and a fly flew into his eye. It only made contact for about a microsecond, but it was enough time for it to lay eggs. After they hatched they started eating his eye from the inside and he was starting to go blind until a doctor finally figured out what was wrong. Just imagine that, getting your eye eaten from the inside and losing your sight all because a fly very briefly made contact with you. Ever since I learned about this I get really paranoid when there is a fly around my face because of the fact that this could possibly happen to me. Worst one I saw was a little kid had pretty normal flu/cold-like symptoms. Doctor treats it as such and kid doesn't get better. This goes on days as kid gets worse. Then as kid becomes bedridden they finally test for other things. And it's been years so my details may be off, but it was basically a parasite he picked up from some kind of animal crap like a raccoon in his yard. By the time they got correct diagnosis it was too late. My kids love playing outside. Scares the ever-loving shit out of me to this day. A Missouri court famously handled the case of Celia, a slave who killed her owner in 1855 while fighting a sexual assault. In such situations, state law considered any woman to be acting in self-defense. However, the court determined that Celia was not a woman in the sense of the law. She was a slave, and her owner had complete control over her. She was given the death penalty by the court. Since she was pregnant, however, her execution was postponed until the child was born, so as not to deprive her owner's successors of their property rights.